Does anyone remember Dungeon Dice Monsters?
It was a spin-off game in the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise that didn't really seem to get a lot of love. It had one small, very strange story arc in the anime,
Dimension the dice!
and only one GBA game that was recently repackaged with the early days collection. As a kid though, I loved this game, and I played the original GBA game for hours when I got it. It had a sort of deck building system, but with dice, and the way that the board would unfold sometimes really made you feel like a master strategist as you worked your way across the board to the Dice Master. This is why I was so excited to try the game again about a year ago, so I downloaded a GBA emulator and booted it right up. And unfortunately, I was immediately disappointed with the game. It was a lot slower paced than I remember, and sometimes really clunky to get units out. Let's not even get into how horrible the computer you play against was at trying to defend itself or really beat any kind of challenge.
I was trying to find a new concept for my game development, and this got me thinking, can I improve this formula while still keeping true to the game that I loved so many years ago? Yes. The answer is yes.
This is where most people would just jump straight into their engine of choice and start making something. I decided I needed something that was easier to play with and modify so that I could define the rules better. Prototyping doesn't always have to be done with software. Sometimes things can be done more simply, especially for a game that is essentially a board game. So I actually started by 3D printing out a tile board, making some paper units and cards for their stats, and I also made a bunch of the patterns that the dice can unfold out to. This allowed me to play with myself, modifying the rules, and finding a lot of stuff I wanted to change before I even wrote a single piece of code. Once I got all the changes in place, then I booted up Unity, which I picked because it has the most support and documentation around it, and I just didn't want to give myself another handicap on this project. Now that I had some rules established and an engine picked out, I could start to make a prototype. It took a lot more time than I was expecting, but I learned a ton. In this first devlog, I want to go over all the changes I'm going to be making from the original Dungeon Dice Monsters formula that I think would make it a better game, and changes I have to make to keep Konami's lawyers off my back. First issue I wanted to address is the Dice Master. In the original game, you weren't able to use your Dice Master as another unit on the board. It does force the player to build to the other side of the board to win. In the anime, this was represented as a pillar you needed to attack, but in the GBA game, they did actually have a physical unit on the board in the starting square, but they also weren't allowed to move or do anything. I think this change is actually pretty easy to make without affecting the original intent. If we allow the Dice Master to move and attack, then the user can keep their Dice Master near the back for defense, or move it around and use its abilities to help their other units more. This allows players to really play the way they want to. I also have a set of 3 tiles to start with instead of the original 1 tile. With the added tiles and the ability to use your Dice Master as a unit, a lot more strategies can come into play for your Dice Master. The next major change I made to the formula is the way that units are summoned, specifically the requirements needed to do so. In the original game, you picked 3 dice to roll, and you had to roll 2 stars of the same level to summon a unit from those dice. This, I feel, really slows the pace of the game. When you're playing the GBA game, you're constantly having turns where you could do nothing, usually at the start of a match, and I think this really hurts the flow of the game and how the player perceives it. In my system, it's just a flat star requirement based on the level of unit you're trying to summon. The unit still needs to be one of the 3 you rolled, but as long as you have the number of stars to pay for the summon, you can place them on the board. This means if you pick a level 1 unit that only requires 2 stars to summon, you have a much higher chance of getting a unit out on the first turn or 2. Especially because the lower level units have a higher amount of stars on their dice. I think this change is honestly one of the biggest, because having nothing to do for your first few turns doesn't feel good for that player, and can quickly turn into feeling like you're behind. Next up are changes to how units work, and the board itself. In Dungeon Dice Monsters, you have to spend a move crest every movement you make on the board. If you wanted to move a unit 3 spaces, you needed to have 3 move crests. This again seemed too slow to the pace of the game, and unintentionally, a lot of times I found myself keeping units doing nothing because I wanted to save all of my crests for the main attacker. I decided to treat units' movement like any other tactics game. Basically, if you have a unit on the board, it can move a set number of tiles based on its type and its level. I think this really helps keep the player from having nothing to do in a turn, and works within the framework that most players are used to with tactics games, like Fire Emblem, Ogre Tactics, and many others. This brings me to one of my final changes for the units, which is more directly inspired by Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself. I always loved the strategies that came from having a defense and attack mode for your cards, so I decided to take that system directly and allow units to go into a defense mode. I implemented a system that costs 1 defense crest to switch to defense mode, and 1 attack crest to switch back to attack mode. In defense mode, the unit's defense is used to subtract from the amount of damage they would take from an attack. This means a well-placed high defense unit could keep your Dice Master defended. Otherwise, you would have to build a path around them. In the original formula, you could spend a defense crest anytime someone was attacking to absorb some of the attack. Having to commit to switch modes forces players to plan a little more ahead instead of stockpiling crests so they can shave off damage when needed. All these crests are going to be used in other ways, like abilities. They will use different amounts of the attack, defense, or special crests to activate them. Again, this forces the player to prioritize where they're going to use them. I also want the Dice Master to be something you can upgrade over time, so that it can match the strength of a level 3 unit. I'm still developing this system, but I think having a Star Crest be the currency used to upgrade your Dice Master will again create an incentive to plan whether you want to save up for an upgrade or summon a new unit. There is one more thing I want to touch on about this game's development. Currently, the easiest way to develop is building it like a standard PC game, but I do intend to have this available as a VR title. I actually started this as a VR project, and there is already all the parts needed to play this in VR, as you can see by the clips I'm showing now. Growing up on Yu-Gi-Oh!, I always loved the dual disc and holographic stadiums. VR to me feels like the definitive way to experience something like this, so that you can feel like you're playing the board game in real life. Anyone who has played the actual Dungeon Dice Monsters game knows how fun but really hard it is to play as a physically printed object. All the tile types and unit figures can be hard to manage, so to me a VR version is the definitive way. You can hold, move, and see the board and units in a physical space, but not have to store it or manage it in the same way. VR seems to me like the best format for a tactic-style board game like this.
Well, I hope this is a good look into the project and what I want to bring to the table as a spiritual successor to the Dungeon Dice Monsters formula. Oddly enough, while doing research for my Dungeon Dice Monsters game, I came across a channel that actually had a lot of similar complaints about the original game. They have a really good video up. I would love to link it here if I can. But they basically went into all the things that they thought were good or bad about the game as well. The channel is called Manga Common. Hopefully I said that right. And I would love for you to go check out their video and their information. They did a really good job condensing their thoughts about this. And some of the things that they said they wanted to change about it, honestly, were exactly the same things that I was thinking about. So I would really love to give their channel some love. And if you can check them out, click on the link here. Well, that's it for today, friends. If you want to see more of the development process, or maybe even get your ideas in on the development process, check me out on Twitch. I'm going to be doing live streams of me developing this game. And who knows, maybe something you say will get into the game. No. Twitch. Yeah, I fucked it up. All right, one more time. One more time. Woo! You're right. Freeze. Cut.